Hello and welcome back to the 100 Jobs Project. I'm your host, Katie, and I'm so excited about our conversation today. Our guest today is Mysti, who served in the Marine Corps for nearly 10 years. She left as a staff sergeant and recently transitioned to a role in the private sector. So we're talking with Mysti today all about being in the Marine Corps as a woman, especially. And this is just like totally out of my wheelhouse. So Mysti, I'm so excited to learn from you today.
Thank you. I'm
Welcome.
excited to be here.
Mysti, just like a quick background from you. You are living on the East Coast now, but are you from the West Coast originally?
I'm from Utah, so not quite the West Coast, but yeah, now I'm over on the East Coast.
How do you like East Coast life compared to the
I
mountains?
do love it. I do miss the mountains, but I really feel at home here. I feel like the East Coast gets a bad rap for, I don't know, being like rude or standoffish or, like super go, go, go
Mm-hmm.
busy. And I love that. That's how I am as a person typically. I'm not as like chill as like a lot of people in California tend to be. So I feel like my husband and I have landed where we're supposed to be. Like I feel like I fit in to society here. And I also love the history. You can't run out of things to do on the East Coast. Like, there's a million things that you can do between all of the cities and going to the beach. You also have mountains. They're just a little further away from me than they were in Utah. Yeah, there's just way more to do, I think.
Yeah, definitely a lot to do. And the history is cool for sure. You're also like renovating a historical building, aren't you?
Yeah. So that definitely for us, like the history is a huge thing that we excited about. And this house, I don't think we would have ever found anything like it, any of the other places that we've lived.
How old is it?
It's almost 100 years old. It's definitely
Amazing. Definitely a
getting
big
up there.
project.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's a huge project, but it's really fun and it's exciting to be able to like kind of integrate ourselves into the community too, because we have like a historic
Mm-hmm.
society in the city that we live in. And so, yeah, it's like, it's been great for us in that regard as well, because like we haven't had roots put down until recently. So having the ability to be in one spot and like contribute to the community and have this fun side project, like it's all good.
Yeah, no, that's definitely amazing and a unique experience to be able to be renovating a nearly 100-year-old building on the East Coast in this like epicenter of history. So I'm really excited for you as you continue that journey.
Thank you.
Before we chat though about your whole work experience, just I have a couple more quick cues to get to know you. And I want to start off with, would you consider yourself more of a homebody or do you prefer to be on the road?
I prefer to be on the road more than at home, which is kind of a struggle
Okay.
with having this place to renovate because it makes balancing that difficult. But yeah, I like to go, go,
Mm-hmm.
go.
Yeah, no, that is fair. And definitely hard though when there are things that are like pulling you to be at home, but you want to be out and about and enjoying this cool history around you a little bit. I guess kind of on that note, when you're out and about, what is your ideal date night?
It's very similar to all of the like historical stuff.
Okay.
I love either going antiquing or going to like a museum
Hmm.
and really getting to spend as much time as I want in each section. I feel like sometimes as like a tourist, you go to a museum and you're like, oh, I have today only to see this place. And so you kind of rush through things. But where we live, we literally can do like one wing of a museum for one date night. And it's amazing. So, and then a few months later, we'll go back and do like another floor or whatever. So yeah, that's my favorite is just getting to like spend time with my husband, learning.
Yeah.
Little nerdy.
Nerdy, but at the same time, like it is really nice to be able to just not have the pressure of having to get through something and being able to like actually stop and enjoy it and I don't know, talk about things, soak things in, learn something like you said. So I'm very on board with that. And antiquing, I mean, who doesn't love that? Do you have any good finds that you've had in the past few months from antiquing that you're really excited about?
We just found a like antique changing table that we're really excited about for like changing diapers and stuff. I am currently pregnant and so it was really
Woohoo!
exciting to be like, yay, like part of the nursery is getting put together and this will actually be useful. Another thing we found recently was a really cool globe that we put in our little like library area. it's awesome. It has, like, I don't know what it's called, but, like, the ridges for, like, the mountains and things like that that they put on maps sometimes. You can
Yeah.
feel it. It's like that all over the globe, so that's really cool because I suck at geography, so it's nice to be able to look at it and be like, "Oh, that's what this is." Yeah, and lots
Yeah.
of really cool books, always books, so
Definitely. And I feel like that's one thing that the East Coast is better about than like if I try to go to an antique shop out the old books out here are way better. But love some good furniture and decor finds.
yeah, agreed.
But yeah, the furniture and decor, I mean, I feel like they just don't make things quite like they used to. So some of those like vintage nursery things too are just so charming. So I'm excited for you to have that charm in your house. Now, this is a little bit different as far as getting to know you, but when you were in the Marines, what did you wear to work? Were you always wearing like a uniform every day or were there like more casual days?
So typically, this is the case for like most Marines. Typically, you're going to be in a uniform. So the only time that I wasn't in a specific uniform is during one of my deployments, in which case I got to wear civilian clothes, which is lexicon for normal people clothes, instead of like
Okay.
the camouflage outfits that you see people in the military wear. But
Yeah.
you're always in some sort of uniform unless you're in like a special unit. So day to day, we call it camis in the Marine Corps. I know other branches call them like BDUs, but basically it's like that stereotypical camouflage pajama suit looking thing. And then you'll have like
Okay.
uniforms for when you go work out, uniforms for when like things are fancier. But yeah, very low effort on my part to like think through outfits.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes it nice to just be able to grab and go. Were they really particular about your shoes too? I mean, I imagine for like more formal settings and stuff, but if you were having like a workout day, could you pick which workout shoes you wanted to wear? Did they have like certain guidelines you still needed to follow?
So, as far as like working out goes, typically I got to choose whatever workout shoes fit what I wanted to do. So, like, I had a few different
Okay.
ones that were more geared towards weightlifting and ones that were more geared towards running. But with your camis or your camouflage uniform, like, you have to wear certain boots. And that's another
Yeah.
thing that's like a little bit more unique to the Marine Corps versus some of the other branches. You always have like your combat boots, no matter which
Hmm.
branch you're in, but the Marine Corps only allows you to have certain brands of those boots, and they have like a little eagle, globe, and anchor Marine Corps symbol on them. And if they don't have that symbol, you can't wear them. So some of the other branches get like Nike versions of combat boots, and I've heard they're super comfy, but I did not get those. So yeah, it's like pretty strict. Same thing with the nicer uniforms. For women, you can wear either pumps or they call them coraframs. They're basically like men's like dress shoes.
Okay.
Both the men and the women have like very strict definitions of what that is. They can't have any ornamentation. They have to be shined a certain way, or you buy them pre-shined. But the issue with that is that they scuff really
Hmm.
easily and you can't fix it. So it's better to have the leather versions that you
Yeah.
can shiny yourself. And then like the women's pumps, if you wear those, I want to say they have to be 2 inches if I remember correctly. You can't have them smaller or larger. Like it's all like very
Okay.
meticulous. It's fun.
I mean, I can't say I'm like surprised, but it is really interesting to hear about just how detail oriented they get about the little things. Were the boots comfortable?
Mm. It depends on the boot. And it depends on your foot. The boots that I got in boot camp, not comfortable at all. I had so many blisters. They were a wreck. I ended up getting boots later on that were like my ride or dies that like I still have them because I'm like, maybe I won't be using them every day, but like if I go hiking, they're really comfy now.
Yeah.
They have like different variations of each boot. So like some will be steel toed for certain people's occupations. Some will be like extra light, which were my favorite ones. I would get the light versions of the boots,
Hmm.
and that made my life a lot easier because they're not so heavy and clunky.
Oh,
Because like in the Marine Corps, you also have to work out in those boots sometimes. So like anything to make that easier is what I would tend to go for. But yeah, it's not necessarily comfy until you get used to it.
okay. Nope, that makes sense. I feel like in different films or in random points of my life, I've seen people out and about running in military uniforms with great big clunky boots. And I have just thought that seems like the most uncomfortable experience of my life. So I'm glad that there are some options, but it sounds like, you've had to deal with some of the discomfort as well.
It's definitely not ideal. In fact, like, I would do my very best to not work out in them because, like, you do have physical fitness tests where you have to do that in the Marine Corps, so you can't get out of it. But I would do my best to not like train in them if I could help it, just because like it doesn't feel great on your joints. At the same time, they are really supportive, and when you're like on your feet all day,
Yeah.
it's nice to have, like, that type of a boot rather than, I don't know, like, being in, like, a tennis shoe, for example. So, yeah, plus and minuses.
No, totally, totally makes sense. One thing that I love asking everyone is what's in your work bag. I feel like that gives us a good kind of picture of, what you need to be prepared for on your work day. And during your time in the Marines, I would love to know, like, did you have a work bag? Were you allowed to bring anything? And if so, like, what were you bringing to your day to day?
Okay, so I did not have, like, an official work bag. You get issued
Okay.
different bags that you can utilize. So, like, if I brought a bag to work, it would be, like, a backpack that I was issued 'cause you can only use certain backpacks and certain colors with your uniforms. But,
Hmm.
the uniforms that we would wear most days have a lot of pockets. So I guess that kind of turns into your work bag a little bit. So one of the things that the Marine Corps is like really big on is that you always have a notebook and a pen with you. In today's day of like using cell phones, even then they're still like they like harp on it. So usually
Okay.
in one of my pockets I would have one of those. Just because like you have to take notes on a million things and like remember where to be and when to be there, and it helps a lot for organizing, especially once you start doing more
Hmm.
like leadership positions, trying to organize everybody that you're in charge of. Like at first it was just a notebook for me, and then it kind of turned into like a small planner. In the Marine Corps, you're not supposed to use the pockets in your pants for much. You end up doing it, but there's like a rule of like not using your pockets to hold things like the cargo part. So
Okay.
those are usually empty, but then in my actual pockets, I always had a pocket knife and a wallet, obviously. And then sometimes, like, I would carry around a little flashlight. It was one of those things where it's like you never know when you're going to need it. And between the pocket knife and the flashlight, it was like I was usually prepared for most things. A lot of the things that you need end up being on site for you,
Yeah.
whatever your job is. So, unless you're like going to the field and needing to pack a whole backpack with all of your gear, you don't really need a whole ton day to day.
I mean, would you also be throwing like hair ties or chapstick or anything like that in your pockets too? Or were you kind of set with that?
Maybe sometimes chapstick.
Okay.
In hindsight, I probably would have, like, kept sunscreen on me, but I was not good about wearing sunscreen,
Huh.
for a very long time. It's very low maintenance in a lot of ways, and you can
Okay.
always make it more high maintenance if you want, but you I find that a lot of Marines get to a point where, especially once they've been in for a little bit, that they're, like, overdoing more than they need to as far as, like, being, like, personally ready, you know?
No, that is really interesting. And you definitely would not find me bringing a pocket knife and a flashlight to work with me every day. So I, again, love hearing that. And you'll have to forgive me in advance because as we talk about the Marines, I will probably sound very ignorant at times.
It's okay.
Military stuff in general, despite having family members or friends in the military, I always feel a little nervous, like I'm going to say the wrong thing or like use the wrong terminology. And so I feel like in my personal life, I will try to just like avoid it. But I'm hoping that here today is a safe space for me to get a few things wrong and hopefully kind of normalize that. Because I'm sure that there are plenty of other people out there who are like me and are like, okay, I'm going to say the wrong thing and I call it the wrong thing. But I would just appreciate patience and correct me.
No, 100%. I think that that is definitely like a normal sentiment that a lot of people have because there's not a lot of people who end up in the military, right? And so it does kind of feel like this otherworldly thing to talk about. And in a lot of ways it kind of is, right? Like when you haven't experienced those things personally, and I think this is for anybody's job, right? Like it seems foreign. So yeah, feel free to mess up. I'll correct you if there's like something egregious, but at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter that much, if I'm being honest.
Sure. And I found that like there's so many similarities between different branches of the military, but each different branch has their own nuances and they call a lot of things that are like at a similar level different things.
It's like a way for each branch to feel like they're special in a way. So yeah, like it's all chaos. Is for those of us who have been in the military, it's chaos. For people who haven't been, I can't imagine
Yeah.
how confusing it is. Like I get confused, and I was in for almost 10 years, right?
Yeah. I thought before our interview, I was like, oh, I could research everything about the Marines and sound super educated about that. And I was like, you know what? No, that wouldn't be authentic. Appreciate, yeah, your patience, appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Anyway, well, just in terms of career and everything, did you have a family history of military service or was that kind of something that you discovered on your own?
I could be wrong about this, but I don't think anybody in my family served other than my dad. My dad
Okay.
was a naval corpsman for 4 years. Um,
Is that in the Navy?
yep, that's in the
Okay.
Navy. Corpsmen are kind of like the equivalent of like a medic or a nurse. They get like very similar
Hmm.
training and they end up working with primarily Navy and Marine Corps because the Marine Corps doesn't have their own medical personnel. So we rely on
Okay.
the Navy for that. Growing up, I had stories from my dad of when he was in, but other than that, and like having like an uncle or like a random third cousin or something that was involved, I didn't know a whole ton of people who were in.
Yeah. I think that's fair and probably a fairly normal experience. Like looking at my family, both of my grandfathers had military service. That was, around the time of Vietnam era. People were being drafted or conscripted. And so it was pretty normal. And I feel like there's a lot of families like that where everyone has a grandparent or an uncle or something, but it is kind of rare to find a family where like military service is at every level for generations and generations. What did you want to be when you were younger then, if not necessarily thinking about military service?
I had like a bunch of different things that I thought would be cool, but like my main goal was always that I wanted to be a dancer. Up
Mhm.
until I joined the Marine Corps, my plan was to dual major in and/or choreography and then in musical theater. So it never was on like a list of things I actually wanted to do. I always thought it would be cool to be a Marine, but I never actually had a plan for that. On a whim is when I joined, and so it was pretty shocking to everybody, kind of myself included, honestly, when I decided to join because I was, like, so far off of what I had been telling people my whole life that I wanted to do, you know?
Okay, so tell me that story. How do you join the Marines on a whim?
I had always had a respect for the Marine Corps. My dad had a really good relationship with the Marines that he had worked with while he was in the Navy, and so he always had good things to say about them. I was trying to figure out how I was going to be paying for school because I don't know if you know this, but being a dancer does not pay a lot of money. And so
So I've heard.
yeah. And so I was sitting there and I was like, okay, even if I can pay for school, I'm not going to be able to make enough money to like ever be out of student loans. And I wasn't even really sure how to get a student loan. So I was like, okay, what are
Yeah.
some other options for me? And I had a few friends at the time who were joining the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I talked to them about it a little bit and everything that they had to say felt I don't know, it felt good. And I went and talked to the recruiters and I was like,
Mhm.
wait, this is exactly what I would love to do. It's always different on paper than it is in person. But on paper, I was like, this is perfect. There's a lot of structure. I get to work out all the time. I get to do badass things. Like I was just like, yeah, that's great. Let's do it. My dad was very upset and my mom was also
Mhm.
very upset, but she didn't tell me that. She just was trying to be supportive. So I my
Okay.
dad yelled at me for like, I want to say it was like 3 days straight. Like we never had like a conversation. He was just
Wow.
yelling. He was just mad. And then he kind of calmed down and he was like, if this is really what you want to do, then you need to go talk to all of the other recruiters for the other branches of the military. And I was like, okay.
Mhm.
I'll go do that, but I know I'm gonna end up in the Marine Corps, right? I went and I talked to the Navy, and they seemed way too chill for me. I mean, we kind of talked about that already. That like I'm very type A. So, talking to the recruiters, they were not type A enough for me, and so I was like, next."
Okay.
And the Air Force, when I went to talk to them, it felt very corporate, and I was like, "That's not what I would like to
Okay.
do." And then the Army actually never called me back to set up an appointment until the day that I was swearing into the Marine Corps. So they called me, like, as I was
Fascinating.
swearing in. They were like, "Hey, do you wanna talk?" And I was like, "No, thanks, though." And that's just my experience, right? Like,
Little late.
yeah, very much so. It just felt right. The personality fit, I guess, just felt right to me when I talked to the Marine Corps recruiters. And so I was like, yeah, this is done. You're going to pay for my dance later down the road, and I get to do cool things and work out all the time. Absolutely.
So, what was the timing on this? Was this like right as you were ending high school? Was this once you had started college? When did you join?
Pretty much right after high school, I kind of had like the summer after I graduated to have realization that I had no idea what I was doing or how to get there.
Yeah.
I want to say it was in like August or September. I signed up to be able to be part of the Marine Corps, but I didn't end up going to boot camp until the next February. So I had a lot of time to like learn more about the Marine Corps as an organization and then like train and get ready for boot camp.
So, did you do a semester at school and then do boot camp?
No, that would have been the smart thing to do. I just worked and
Okay.
I worked out and I helped around the recruiting station. They have what's called I want to say it's called the DEP, and I can't remember what it stands for, but essentially it's like all of the people who are waiting to go to boot camp. And so
Okay.
I helped out there. I kind of did like a mini leadership role there and like helped organize. I'm going to say PT a lot. It's physical
Okay.
training workouts. So if I say PT, that's what I'm talking about. But I would organize like PT.
Physical training, not physical therapy. Got it.
Correct. I was so confused later on in life when I had to go to physical therapy, and the physical therapist would call it PT, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. So that was fun to learn.
It's funny. I mean, I also think that it's smart though to take some time, work, save some money, and then jump into things too. So when you went to boot camp, what was that like? How long was it? How many women were there? Was it mostly a bunch of dudes? What was that like?
Unfortunately, I can only talk about my experience with boot camp, which is no longer how it is. It used to
Okay.
be in the Marine Corps that we had the men and women separated. I was
Mm,
in a platoon of only women. My platoon and my sister platoon, which was like the other set of women going through boot camp at the same time. And we were in our own women's battalion. It was 4th Battalion. At the time, women were only going to boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina. The men have both South Carolina and uh, Pendleton, California, to go to boot camp. I don't know if that has changed, but there were like a lot of men, but we never saw them because we were, except for at the rifle range and like occasionally when we would be on runs or marches because we had like our own
mhm.
battalion. We were segregated that way. Now the Marine
Gotcha.
Corps integrates them together. And if I'm being honest, I don't know how that works. I do know that you
Yeah.
end up in a platoon with men. I don't know how like the sleeping arrangements go or anything like that, but I would imagine it's still separate, just like in different squad bays, which is basically like, in the movies when you see a bunch of bunk beds and it's like a big room, that's a squad bay. So I would assume it's probably separated that way, but when I was there it was just the women. And honestly, it was great. It was really great. That was the first time that I had ever been with so many women, and a lot of us were like really young, but it was still a great experience to be able to be surrounded by women, and all of our drill instructors were women. While there are a lot of things that maybe aren't great because it's boot camp, it was really cool
Yeah.
to see women in that role.
Yeah, definitely. That's not something that I would have known or expected just being around so many women when you were doing your initial training. That training was what, like 2 or 3 months?
3 months, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And during that time, I mean, it sounds like you went to the rifle range, you're doing marches, you're doing runs, you're getting a lot of workouts in. Were there other things that you were really like learning about? Did you have classroom time, like learning about the history of the Marines and stuff?
Yep. You have classroom time where you learn about, like you said, like the history of the Marine Corps. Also learn about like how to be a good leader, how things like fire teams and platoons and battalions and all that like military structure works. You do drill. It's where you utilize like marching skills and like your rifles. If you ever look up like silent drill platoon Marine Corps, you'll get some really cool drill, which is honestly, it's kind of like dancing. Like you learn specific movements, they call it out and you do it. It takes a lot of coordination. We were never as good as the silent drill platoon. That's like its own special thing in the Marine Corps. You get handpicked for
Mhm.
that. You clean a lot. You clean so much.
Okay.
You a lot of it is like learning discipline, and the entire structure of the Marine Corps boot camp is to go from breaking you down to building you back up. So you go through like your first
Mhm.
little bit of a lot of discipline, a lot of getting in trouble for things that you don't think should be that big of a deal. You learn a lot about like having attention to detail and the minutia of things. And then you get to a point
Yeah.
where you're like building on those skills versus kind of just getting yelled at the whole time. The yelling doesn't stop until you graduate boot camp, but there is a purpose to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's a lot of learning.
And it does sound like it at least, eases up a little bit toward the end of boot camp.
Yeah, in some ways. You get
Yeah.
in trouble less often, but you get in bigger trouble because you should know better, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. Now, I'm curious, after boot camp, what came next for you? Did you immediately like jump into a military assignment or yeah, was there some sort of break?
The Marine Corps has like a different pipeline than the other branches. So you go to boot camp, then you go to Marine Combat Training, MCT, and that's about a month. And that's where you specifically learn combat oriented skills that you might not have learned in boot camp. So like you try out different weapons platforms. So like you learn how to like shoot a machine gun, for example. You learn how to throw a grenade. You talk through formations and like tactics and things like that. You learn how to dig a fighting hole, which is like super old school. We don't really use it that often, but like you sit there and you dig a hole. And once that's done, then you go to your job school. And that is dependent on what you end up signing up for in the Marine Corps. The length of that school depends on the person. So, like, my school
Okay.
was 9 months and then another 3 for the second part of it. So, I was in school, I thought I was avoiding
Mhm.
but I ended up being in school for basically a year that was
Yeah.
all just about my training.
So when you sign up for your school, do you do that when you initially sign up with the Marines or is that something that you're able to decide a little bit later?
So typically you sign up when you get assigned your job when you sign up for the Marines. And they
Okay.
will try to give you options, but in the Marine Corps, you don't really get to choose your job. It's up to what is available at the time and what score you got on the ASVAB, which is like the initial test that they have you do. And it goes over like different competencies of like math, engineering, language arts, those types of things. But like a lot of people take this in high school. And then
Yeah.
based off of that, off of your scores on that, they'll give you like different job potentials. So like I scored really well. And so I had everything except for like, I think working on nuclear stuff as an option for me. And I
Mhm.
was like, I don't want to do that anyway. I knew from then. But there's also an option when you join, it's kind of like a wild card option. And basically, once you get through boot camp, they tell you what you're going to be. And that's like an open contract. I don't suggest ever that. I suggest at least having some sort of idea of what you're getting yourself into because open contract could mean literally any job that you qualify for. And at least you're giving yourself a heads up if you know before you go to boot camp.
Yeah, that is definitely a little bit intimidating. So after the initial basic training, combat training, job training, did you then kind of get a chance to go back and study dance or do some of that? Or did you jump right into military work?
You pretty much jump right in to military work, and I was active duty, so that was my
Okay.
full-time job. If you end up doing, like, the reserves or things like that, then you do totally have the option to, like, go to school or have another job on top of doing the reserves, but for me, it was my full-time job. I did take dance classes here and there when I could, but I just didn't have time or any really to be able to do that. Once you're in the military, one of the things that doesn't get talked about a whole ton is that you essentially have a 24 job. You can get called in at any time. You don't have normal hours. You're there until you're told to go home. Some days you'll work like 6 hours and that's great. And other days you will work like 14 and be told to come back at 4 in the morning the next day. In that regard, like it was just really hard to fit dance into my life at that point. And because of where I was stationed at originally, which was Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for like those types of hobbies.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being challenging. So, again, forgive my ignorance, but active duty doesn't necessarily mean that you're deployed, right? But it does mean that you're like living on base, you're working on base in some capacity. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. So you don't necessarily have to be living on base if you are married or
Okay.
of a certain rank, but you are working on base. And like you said, like you don't have to be deployed at that time to be considered active duty. It's essentially like, are you working full
Okay.
time or not?
And if I'm not mistaken, you have actually been deployed a few times, though. Is that right?
Yeah, I deployed twice.
How long did those deployments last? And then what is like day to day life like when you're deployed versus when you're working on base?
My first deployment was 9 months. My second deployment was 6 months. For the Marine Corps, that is pretty normal. It's usually like 6 to 9 months per deployment. During like major times of war or things like that, sometimes they'll be longer, but they're very rarely shorter than 6 months. Honestly, I loved being deployed. I loved it. If I always said that like if I could
Hmm.
bring my husband with me, that I would just stay deployed because there's just a lot of fulfillment I've found with being deployed. You have one purpose, and it's whatever your job is while you're there. There's an importance behind it. You wouldn't be deployed if there wasn't. So you have this like extra drive to be doing really good work in whatever your field is. You like eat, sleep, and breathe your job. And that is kind of hard. But at the same time, like when you are not deployed, sometimes you do random things that have nothing to do with your job. And like you have to because you're in the military, you're told to
Yeah.
do it, right? I was not a Humvee mechanic. But I would have to go clean out Humvees sometimes. And I was like, why am I doing this? This has nothing to do with what I do. When you're deployed, that never happens. It was so nice to have just like this like focus on what I loved doing and being able to like be around other people who are also working hard and loving what they're doing. And you're all going towards a common goal. So yeah, like being deployed was, in my opinion, amazing.
Yeah. Are you open to sharing a little bit about where you were deployed to or what you were working on?
I don't mind sharing. My first deployment was to Afghanistan, and a lot of what I was doing was just helping make sure that relations with like the Afghan army and the Marines that we were with were going well. It was really interesting. It was fun. And then my other deployment was primarily working on as like a teacher. So I was like teaching people how to better work in a deployed environment. That was also really fulfilling to be able to be like, oh, let me share my expertise with you.
No, that is really cool to hear about. I think that a lot of times, like for a long time myself, and I know others that I've talked to who don't have a heavy military background, have kind of assumed that, like, if you're deployed, that means you are going into a combat zone and you are doing like combat stuff all day, every day to day. And as I've just like over the past few years, I've realized that that's not necessarily always the case.
Mhm.
So it's cool to hear about what you were doing and the different ways that you were making an impact.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty normal thought on deployments because they can be really scary. And like I won't
Yeah.
lie, like being in Afghanistan, that was rough. And like our base was attacked
Yeah.
at one point, and it wasn't like all sunshine, but my day to day was not manning weaponry or things like that. So like it's definitely different than people perceive.
And I'm sure for some people, I mean, their deployments are that, where they are going
100%.
to combat zones and seeing stuff every day. But there are so many different jobs that make the whole organization run. You need a little bit of all of that, and that's just not everyone's experience. So I appreciate you sharing yours. Is there anything about your job or the Marines in general that a lot of people wouldn't expect?
I think when it comes to the Marine Corps, the expectation is that the Marines, like, have it all together.
Yeah.
And we like to try. We like to pretend that we do. But a lot of the time, like, we're just trying our best and making it work. The Marine Corps in particular has like a really good reputation of being
Hmm.
the very best and being super savvy when it comes to military tactics and things like that. And while that is true, there's a lot of like just hoping it works out. And until you are part of it, you don't really know because I feel like we have a really good PR team. Until you are in it, you just don't see how much is kind of chaos on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's kind of how every job works. It seems like it's a well-oiled machine on the outside, and then you are looking at it and you're like in depth, and you're like, my goodness, how does this even function?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me personally, that was really surprising because I was expecting just like everything to be perfect, and it just doesn't end up that way.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And I think that most jobs are like that to some extent. So it's almost nice to hear that, even the Marines don't always have it 100% together 100% of the time. When you were serving the Marines, what were some of the most rewarding parts of your job and the most challenging on the flip side?
This is gonna sound so cheesy, but some of the most rewarding things to me were seeing the impact of the good things that we did. Being able to like tangibly see that we were making a difference in the world and that it was a good difference. And that's not always the case. Don't get me wrong. That is not always the case. But when that was happening, it was just like, man, I couldn't have picked a better job to be able to like be helping people. And
Yeah.
that was just so great. Another thing that I loved was being like a leader and a mentor for other Marines, and especially for like the younger Marines who were just coming in, who were like me, who came in at like 18 and had no idea what they were doing. Being able to like hopefully be like a good example to them and like guide them through such a transition in their life, but also in their career. I loved that. Some of the hard things I think were honestly the polar opposite of when, you would do things thinking that it was like the right thing and then realizing that it wasn't and realizing the impact of that and struggling with that, doing kind of the like, if I had done this differently, would it have been better? Like that type of thought process.
Yeah.
For me in particular, I struggled as much as I loved being deployed. I really struggled at first when I was in Afghanistan because we had been in Afghanistan as a country for a very long time at that point,
Yeah.
and I was having a really hard time seeing the impact and understanding, like, how I fit into it, and grappling with the fact that, like, maybe we're not always the good guys, and that was really hard. I think that's probably the hardest part of my career, and honestly, maybe one of the hardest points in my life so far is, like, coming to terms with that and, like, trying to figure out how do I be a good person and a good Marine at the same time, because sometimes it felt there was, like, this cognitive dissonance for me that felt like you couldn't be both. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun, but that's why we have therapy, is to work through those things, and that was a game changer.
What was balancing personal relationships like during your service? I mean, I know that you got married at
Uh,
one point to a man who also had his own set of deployments and everything else. Was that something that felt like pretty easy to work through, or was that challenging in terms of getting personal time and connection together?
I have the unique experience of being married to a Marine and being a Marine at the same time. A lot of people are married to a service member but aren't a service member themselves. So it is definitely a little bit different. In some regards, it's way easier because you understand, you're speaking the same language. If I have
Yeah.
some crazy schedule, he's not upset because he either has the same crazy schedule or he did that last month. And so it was
Okay.
really easy in that regard to be like on the same page.
Yeah.
As somebody who has both had their spouse deploy and been deployed, it is so much easier to deploy than it is to be the one that's left behind. That's really hard. Partially because, like, selfishly, you know how fun it is to deploy. So, at least for me, right, I'm sitting at home being like, man, I wouldn't have to be cleaning my house right now. I could be doing my job and just like living my best. And instead, you have to be like supportive. And when you get to call your spouse, you're like, yeah, I'm so happy for you, and you are, but, like, you're sad for yourself, right? So, that was
Yeah.
hard. My husband and I, at one point, did the math, and I wanna say we had spent more time apart between deployments and field exercises. We had spent more time apart from each other than we had together in our marriage. And I want to say when we did that calculation, I want to say it was like 5 or 6 years in to being married. And so it was like if you took the time that we had actually spent together and only counted that as our marriage, it would have been like 2 years. That was really hard. And we have now gotten to the point where we have been together physically longer than apart, but that was really, really hard on our marriage, even with all of the boons of like understanding each other's jobs and being able to be there for each other in a different type of way. It's hard. And
Yeah.
it's also hard with like your family, right? Like your extended family, you don't necessarily live near them, so you have to be really good about calling them, which I'm not always good at that. They get scared for you a lot, and so there's a lot of like reassuring them that things are not as bad as they sounded on the news or whatever. And you miss out
Yeah.
on a lot, like our mutual
Yeah.
friend, Mariah, I was supposed to be a bridesmaid at her wedding and I couldn't go. So we like FaceTimed me in and I was like fake bridesmaid for the day via phone. And
Yeah.
like as much as I love that and I think it's such a cute memory, you miss on out on things like that. Normally, people can just like take a sick day or something like that in their job and go to a wedding.
Yeah.
You don't have that flexibility. So it does make personal
Right.
relationships kind of hard.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. As you're navigating all of the personal stuff plus the work stuff and the crazy schedule, was there anything that you really did to try to unwind or take time for yourself?
So at first, no. And that was really unhealthy.
Yeah.
I got to a point where I mentioned needing to go to therapy at one point. I was like not well because I was just so focused on the Marine Corps and doing a good job and being the best that I could be, and that I didn't have hobbies and I didn't unwind, and my husband wasn't around a lot. So I didn't really have a lot of friends because my personal interests and values are not necessarily things that were popular in the Marine Corps. I would like have good acquaintances at work, but very rarely wanted like hang out with coworkers. And so it got like pretty lonely. And then I learned that like you need hobbies. That was such a crazy revelation to me. Once I started learning that, I tried figuring out ways to take time for myself and do that more regularly. We ended up moving duty stations from North Carolina to Maryland, and that was really helpful because there's a lot more to do in Maryland than there was where we were in North Carolina. So I was able to start taking dance classes again, which was amazing. I ended up getting a dog, which was great too, because like we would like go to the dog park with her and play outside a lot. And that's kind of how I rekindled my love of like being outdoors, because for a while it was kind of like I hated it because in the Marine Corps you do it a lot and you're like forced to do these things. And I used to love hiking, and then I was like, hiking, absolutely not, do not make me do it. Actually taking the time to like be outside and be excited to go camping, be excited to be on walks, find a way to like love running instead of it just being like a thing that I have to do. Those types of things,
Yeah.
like it changed everything for me to be able to like take the things that I loved doing, and part of the reason I joined the Marine Corps in the first place and like flip it on its head and make those my hobbies again versus just something that I have to do for work. So that was huge. I got into gaming. I started like reading again for fun and not just for like military.
Yeah.
And that was great. I was like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. I hadn't picked up like a fiction book in, I couldn't, like years, literally years.
Yeah.
It was like, I think it was like 8 years in, and I picked up a fantasy book and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great.
There's a
Like
new world out there. Yeah.
100%. I feel like it's this way with pretty much any job, but it's really easy to lose
Mhm.
yourself in it. And then trying to find ways to like undo that, it takes a minute, but it ends up
Yeah.
being worth it.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. I think that for so many of us, regardless of what you're doing, there is a little bit of a period where you're really focused on your job, you lose yourself a little bit, and then you have to rediscover. And that rediscovery is really exciting and just helps you figure out how to balance your life a little bit better for hopefully the rest of life. Now, I usually like talking with people too, just on a different note about pay structure and everything. But I think that with most military branches, a lot of that is available publicly online. I
Yep.
know that pay scales can kind of vary by like years of service and everything, but I would just be curious, like, well, two more questions. First, you've transitioned out of the military now. What was that transition like? Did it feel like pretty smooth, or were there things that you like missed?
Man, transitioning is hard. Especially if you've never had like a quote unquote real job. Before
Yeah.
I had had jobs before the Marine Corps, but like I was a teenager, right? So it is always
Mm-hmm.
a difficult transition for pretty much any service member, but especially those who have like been in for a while and then you're expected to be like a normal adult and you're like, what do you mean I have to figure out what to wear to work? What do you mean I have to figure out insurance? Is like
Yeah.
you don't do that when you're in the Marine Corps or in any of the branches, right? So that was really hard and still is, honestly. Like there's still a lot of things where I'm like, I don't know how that works. I'm just gonna like figure it out, I guess. But more so than like learning life skills that you didn't know you didn't have. I think the hardest part is the slowdown. You're working essentially 24/7. If you're not, it's on your brain. You know you can get called in at any time. You know that like one change in the news means that like everything could be flipped on its head and you could be leaving in like a week, right? To go
Yeah.
from that and having all of that stress to not having that at all is really weird. It's nice in a lot of ways. You're like, wow, I can like just be like I can breathe.
Yeah.
But it's also hard. I think the best way I can describe it is if you've ever been like in theater or part of like a sports team or something like that and it comes to the end of the season or you're no longer performing and you're like, okay, well, now what do I do with all my time? I was really
Yeah.
stressed. I was ready for the season to be over, but now it's over and I wish it wasn't. It kind of feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you also lose is kind of like good friends. Um,
Yeah.
you kind of have to get along with your coworkers, because even if you don't have, like, you might end up fighting right next to each other, right? So like you have this thing in the back of your head always that like even if you don't like a person necessarily, like you care for them and they care for you.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you don't have that and you're like now you have to make friends outside of like maybe you find coworkers you really like, but like you don't have to. So then it's like where's your support system? Because it used to be the Marines around you.
Yeah.
Um and now it's not. And for people like me who didn't move back home, it is like weird to be like, "Oh crap. Now I have to like kind of restart almost." But it's more than anything, it's just like such a weird point to be at because you've had like this whole
Yeah.
career and now all of a sudden even if you're doing a similar job, it's not quite the same and you're starting a new career. And
Right.
that's whether you get out of the military before retirement or after military retirement. Like either way, like you are just like fully starting over your life essentially. So yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's weird. And I don't think people talk about it enough. It's a pretty
Yeah,
weird
I can
place to
imagine.
be at.
Yeah. I mean, I think that with starting any new job, that is kind of closing a chapter and opening a new chapter. But I can see when your job is so tied to so many aspects of your life as it is in the military. I mean, ending that and venturing out into something new is like starting a whole new part or a section of a book rather than just closing a chapter. It's
Yeah.
exciting to have a new beginning, but it is also very, very, very different. And there may not be a ton of continuity from chapter to chapter as there would be from kind of a regular job shift. Props to you for doing it. And it sounds like doing it really well
Thank
since
you.
you've been out for a little bit. My last question that I would love to end on is just as you think about, how your time in the military shaped you and also just as you've grown as a person, what does success look like to you now?
Success to me now has it's been a really hard place to get to. But to me now, it's about calm and like peace and putting myself first and putting my family first, which slows things down a lot. It slows things down immensely. And that's been the hard part, right? Is like going from wanting to be the best and be promoted and striving to just be like ever growing in my career. I've noticed that what actually makes me happy, and this is totally dependent on like everybody individually, right? So like no shade to anybody who feels differently, but for me
Mhm.
now I look at success as like, do I get to see my husband at the end of the night? Do I make enough money to be helping my house get renovated? Do I make enough money to support this baby that's on the way? Do I have the time and the energy to like go to trivia nights with friends? If the answer is yes, then like I'm living my very best. Whereas before, none of those things were ever on my brain, even my husband. Like, and that's crazy. I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but it's just crazy to think about now just how different it is for me, where I just think I got to a point where I realized I missed out on so much and was so anxious all the time that now success to me is like getting to hang out with my husband or go on a
Yeah.
girls trip just because and like not have to worry about whether or not it's going to like make or break my career if I'm not there for a specific thing.
Absolutely. There are different seasons in all of our lives. And I think it's so lovely to be in a season where success really feels like peace and calm and prioritizing time with loved ones, especially as you're in the middle of a chapter of welcoming a new baby soon. So I wish you success wherever life takes you. And thank you again, Misty, so much for sharing your time and your story and also for your service.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. But I think that just about wraps us up for today. Thank you. Just as we close out, I'll mention that you can find us at 100jobsproject.com on Instagram, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another episode. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.